But since we didn't have a show yesterday, we've asked Rodney Orr to join us on Tuesday this week because there's some potential football recruiting news for the Tide later in the week that we want to cover, and also want to get Rodney's thoughts on football players and men's and women's basketball players returning to campus. Good morning, Rodney.
Hey, Gary, how are you?
Doing well. Good to have you. The big news on Friday, the SEC president's voting to allow voluntary workouts to begin on campus for football players, men's and women's basketball players on June 8th. Good news, I think, for those of us who want to see a football season played, and this is the first step, I think, in that direction.
Yeah. I don't think that we would have gotten this far with that step if it weren't for positive signs. I think with the progress that's being made in terms of the COVID virus. So I think it's a good sign for everyone. I certainly don't think anyone would be put at risk, Gary, in any of these decisions. I know there's some people that, kind of question that, but, I really think that this is something that's a positive decision and something that they feel comfortable doing at this point.
Yeah, let me ask you this, Rod, because I had this discussion with Rodney Orr a little bit earlier. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about, how much preparation do you need to play the season? I've shared this with you. I've been on record saying the whole time, I don't think football is a game where you can have your student athletes away for several months and then just show up in August and get ready and play. I don't think that is the way it works. I think you have to get them here. You have to get some conditioning with your coaches. Maybe in July there's an opportunity to have a few practices prior to fall camp. But certainly I think this gives you enough time to prepare to play the season, and that's why I said this was such big news. I just don't think you could bring them in all of a sudden in August and play on September the 5th. Maybe you could, Rodney. How do you see it? Is this enough time reasonably to get ready to play and have a season begin on September the 5th as scheduled?
Well, I think it's in the nick of time. I don't think you could go much later because I do think that the way it is now. Certainly it's important to get the players back because, listen, they've been gone since March. So you really don't know what kind of shape these guys are in, how they've been eating, how they've been taking care of their bodies. That on top of preparing a team to play and to execute at a high level. I mean, all of those things require a lot of preparation. And, they would have had spring practice that they didn't get. And then they would have had a month off, which would have been most of the month of May. And then they would have been back here, Gary, at the very end of May or 1st of June, ready to start the summer conditioning program. So now we're hoping that they, even though they missed spring practice and all of those things, hopefully the things that they did in terms of the workouts over the last couple of months that they were able to do, hopefully they're in, relatively good shape. They come back, ready and prepared to kind of pick up now where they left off. And I'm hoping, now I have no idea. I don't even know if this is going to be really a consideration, but I would certainly hope that maybe at some point they give them a number of practices or opportunities to prepare as a team. Maybe a mini camp, whatever you want to call it. Gary, to prepare them for the opening of camp in August. So let's say maybe the first week of July, whatever it is, whenever they decide to do it, late June, that they give them an opportunity to have 8-10 practices of some sort, whether it's in shorts, all in shorts, or whether there's a few days that they can go in pads. I really don't know how that would work, but I think that would be a great opportunity, and hopefully that'll happen.
I do too. I hope so as well. I think that makes it easier to have a season. We know this, even with the extended dead period, recruiting has continued, and Alabama's picked up a little momentum. We discussed Kane Williams last week, the latest commitment for the Crimson Tide. That's 5 total now. But Alabama is expecting to hear announcements from a couple of prospects. Let's start with Jaden Roberts, the big lineman out of North Shore in Houston, Texas, 6'6", 320. Could do something on, I think is scheduled to do something on Wednesday, and Alabama's in the mix. How do you feel about Jaden Roberts, Rodney?
Well, I've spoken to some coaches out there at North Shore several times over the past and spoken specifically to them about Jaden Roberts. And, yeah, he's a mammoth guy. I think you mentioned his size, 6'6", 350. He's got a lot of potential, obviously. He was a teammate of Damian George, offensive lineman who signed with Alabama in last year's class, be a true freshman this year. I know that they're really close. Again, I want to be careful how I say this because we don't really know what Alabama's doing in terms of, do guys have committable offers? I really don't like to get into that.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know where, for example, LSU. I do know that their people are reporting they wanted to see him in camp before they gave him a committable offer. So I think right now, if based on things I hear, Auburn is probably the team. His quarterback, Demetrius Davis, had committed to them earlier at North Shore there, committed to Auburn. So he kind of wants to maybe possibly team up with him. But we'll see, Gary. Here's the thing to remember, too. It's a long process. We've seen guys flip many times, and it's become more of a prevalent thing. And I think this year it could even become more prevalent because these guys have not been able to take visits. Some of these guys have not taken a visit since February. So I think when things open back up, some of these guys are going to want to take visits, and things could change.
News that Alabama fans are anxiously awaiting this week is the linebacker Ian Jackson out of Prattville, 6'2", 210, extremely athletic, can really run, and he is going to announce his decision this week, Rodney. And I now, in this case, I think we'd all be very surprised if he doesn't select Alabama, right?
Well, I think so. I talked to his coach, Caleb Ross, about 2 weeks ago, and he told me that he felt like, as his coach, that it was his opinion that Alabama was the favorite, and I think that's been the general consensus of just about everyone, is that Alabama's the team to beat there. With he has over 30 offers. Gary, he's 6'2", close to 6'2", 210 pounds right now. Very athletic kid. I think he's underrated, very underrated. Even though some people have him a 4-star, I think some have had him a 3-star as well. But I think he's a guy that, just in terms of the name, the recognition that he's, the publicity, and I'm talking about, the buzz, if you will, on the internet or how people perceive it. I think he's a great player. I think he's a tremendous prospect, and I think he would be a huge pickup for Alabama.
Yeah, I'm with you there 110%, Rodney. I think he's a tremendous prospect. With the dead period having been extended, and you said this in regards to the prospect that I asked you about earlier in Jaden Roberts, that's probably the case for recruiting period. This year more than ever, there'll be commitments, but once things open up again and if we have a season and kids can come to games and can take visits, you might see more so than ever flips and guys that took early offers that might reconsider. I'm getting the impression that you're feeling on how this is, that there'll be one recruiting process during this dead period and then another recruiting process once things open up.
Well, I certainly think that's very possible. That's a very possible scenario. I think that's the way I've been thinking that way for quite a while. As this thing continued to be extended, where they could not take visits, the recruiting dead period. So, I could really see that because, listen, I think what we've seen here is, and we've talked about this, the programs that especially use the spring evaluation period, the camps in this June, as opportunities to see guys up close, kind of make decisions or, kind of continue to evaluate and all of these things in terms of deciding which guys do we want to take. You didn't have that. So I think this is also going to be an opportunity that you're going to see coaches maybe the first 3 or 4 games, which they do this anyway, but maybe put even more emphasis on the first 3 or 4 games of the season. They're saying, hey, look, we need to reevaluate this guy because he's really looking good. He's maybe somebody that we think we could fit where we weren't so sure back in the summer, back in the spring. So I think you'll see then coaches staffs kind of change their direction on some kids and go after them, and maybe more aggressively. So I think this fall recruiting is going to be wild. Well, let me say this: I think it potentially could be wild and produce a lot of changes.
Yeah, I do too. All right, final topic and back to college football as we sit here, Rodney, and we're still in late May. Season's over 3 months away. A lot can change, both positively and negatively. But your vibe right now in regards to the season and it starting on time, September 5th?
Well, my vibe was certainly no, concrete information, obviously. But my vibe would be that everything sounds or seems to be headed in the right direction. Again, there's been some talk about rumors, as you know, that maybe USC would not be the opponent. Maybe that's possible. We don't know that yet. But right now it even seems like if you listen to the USC athletic director and the things he's tweeted out, they're planning on playing. It sounds like to me, at least the last I heard from them. So, listen, I think it sounds positive right now. And you know what? I think we should all hope that it is positive.
Yeah, if you're a sports fan, I can't imagine under any scenario you'd be pulling against college
But think about
football.
this, Gary. Think about this, and I agree with you. But think about this too. I think it goes beyond the sport. It goes because I think if this happens and if they're confident with these decisions, that it's just an indication that things are moving in the right direction in terms of this virus, which we think it is. Everything indicates that it is. So, I think sometimes people get hinged on one side or the other, and you would think that most people would be hoping for the positive, and I certainly hope that's the case.
I know one thing that's positive is that Tider Insider, man, heck, Roddy, I guess you've been around now 25 years or so, and you just keep churning out the information. You got a great community there. A word about TiderInsider.com before we close it out.
Yeah, TiderInsider.com. It's only $48 a year, and you can get instant access with your credit card. That gives you all of our premium information, but also the forums. You mentioned those. The All Sports Forum picking up a little bit, Gary, but also the Quad, where, it's just it has been something over the last 3 months on the Quad. But hey, Gary, yesterday we put out our Memorial Day 7. 7 guys that we think right now in this recruiting class, Alabama's in good position to land. And if they were to land most of those guys or all of them, that alone would be a banner class. So, that's something that people may want to check out. We have stuff like that, and we again look forward to everything picking up.
That's TiderInsider.com, and of course, catch Rodney and me tonight on Tider Insider TV at 6:30 on WVUA 23. We'll have a lot of fun as we always do on TITV. I appreciate it, Rod.